A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 10th edition of the Together for Education webinar brought to you by Notebook. As you are aware, the coronavirus pandemic has been one of the worst humanitarian crises that we have faced in living history. During this tough time, schools have been shut down. We at Notebook decided to put together the Together for Education webinar for people from different walks of life to come and share their thoughts with teachers, parents, and students so that they can be better equipped to handle the various problems that they face in their day-to-day lives. I thank you all for the phenomenal support we have received for the webinars thus far, and I'm sure we can count on you to support us in the weeks to come. Today, we'll discuss the topic of alternative career choices in this webinar titled The Road Not Taken. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you will know when you find it. These words were said by Steve Jobs in the year 2005. All of us study, get into higher studies, eventually get employed and follow a living. Some of us, however, have the conviction and the courage to follow our hearts into what we are truly passionate about. Today's webinar seeks to bring together eminent personalities from those walks of life which we normally do not consider the regular modes of employment. These people followed their hearts, sometimes at great personal risk, and then made it big. Without much ado, let us begin with a particular profession that has become really prominent of late, and some great performers from across the country have been using the digital medium to entertain us every day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you Anshu Mor. Anshu is a stand-up comedian, a writer, a podcaster, and a storyteller. Anshu is an engineer by training, and he finished his MBA in international business, then getting into the corporate career, which spanned 19 years. The last 11 years, he worked for Microsoft, and he became the director of the Xbox business unit for Microsoft. With all of this happening, with his career growing great, one fine morning, he decided to leave his corporate career and embark on a journey of becoming an entertainer, a storyteller. He started his entertainment and storytelling company, Talking Mime, in the year 2016. Today, he is one of India's foremost stand-up comedians. It is my pride and privilege to introduce to you Anshu Mor. Anshu, if you're there.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you guys hear me? If somebody can just raise hands or say yes.
Yes.
Whichever
Anshu,
way.
can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I can. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's very weird just performing to a laptop right now or just talking in front of a laptop because I can't see most of you guys. But first of all, thank you so much for calling me over. Alternate career is a very, very interesting topic to talk about these days. It's one of those topics that I discuss with audiences after every show, because literally after every show that I do, because they know my story, somebody walks up to me and says, yeah, I want to quit my corporate life and do something else. And it always amuses me the number of people who want to quit their corporate life. I think it's close to the range of about 80-90%, especially when they hit their 30s and 40s. So I'm just going to give you guys a sense of what this entire career is, and probably if you allow me also, I will talk about this whole following your passion bit, which is a very romanticized notion and sometimes too romanticized. So as was said in the introduction, I was working with Microsoft till 2016. I was the head of Xbox business in India. I was also at that point 43 years of age, and I had my son in 10th. And then I saw this movie called Tamasha. I don't know how many of you have seen it, or if you've seen it and still working where you are working. I got inspired and I decided to quit. because I thought I'll follow my passion. And so I actually went to, true story, I actually went to office the next day after seeing Tamasha, and I put in my resignation letter. And the only thought in my head was that I want to be on stage and make people laugh. My parents, although they thought that I'm joining Bollywood for some reason, because my mom called me up. She was like, "Beta, ye sab to theek hai, Karan se dur rehna." And I was like, "What?" So, but yeah, so I quit. I quit because I think the desire uh, to be on stage was much bigger than what I was doing in corporate life. And don't get me wrong, I want to kind of clear this upfront that I was enjoying my corporate life. Okay, I really used to love working at Microsoft. I was the head of the gaming and entertainment business. It can't be more fun than that. So it was not one of those Ranbir Kapoor things where you're dejected with life and then you run to the airport to follow your passion. Not that. I just knew that there was something going on in my head about being on stage, which was a parallel thing running. And I had to do it. And I knew that I would regret it much later in life, because I truly believe that the times have changed now, that now you can follow alternate careers. Like I still remember when I used to not study in school, my dad would tell me कि बेटा पढ़ाई नहीं करोगे तो चाय की दुकान खोलोगे. And now there is Chayos and Chai Point with multi-million-dollar fundings. So some kid actually thought, dad, great idea, and started his own chai ki dukaan, right? So that's the world we live in. I think everything is possible. So I quit, and I got into stand-up comedy. I had no idea, by the way, when I quit, how to become a stand-up comedian. I had no kind of understanding of how much money is made in comedy business. I just knew I had to do it. And I thought that in my head, the logic was that if I sit down and do an Excel sheet of what is possible, what is not possible, where is my provident fund, and where will the next check come from, I would possibly not take the decision. Because then there are too many questions in your head. So I decided to first quit, and then I got into wanting to become a stand-up comedian. And it's been now about 4 years now, exactly actually 4 years. And I'm sitting here. I've done about 450 shows in India and abroad. Got a decent following on YouTube. I think about 28, 29 million views on the videos. So it kind of, I think it has worked out for me in some sense. But there are few myths that I wanted to address, right? Both around comedy as well as around this whole notion of following passion and doing what you really want to do. The first one is around comedy as a business. I think a lot of young people, especially right now, see us professional comedians on stage with all the spotlight and videos and people clapping and laughing, and they think it is entertainment business. It is, no doubt. We are in the entertainment business, and those who become famous become celebrities. There's no doubt about it. But I think what most people miss out to understand is the amount of hard work that is required to do comedy. It is by far considered to be one of the toughest professions in the world. Actually, there was a study done in the US where it was the most feared thing that a human can do or can experience was stand-up comedy. And the second was death. So you can imagine how scary it is to come on stage and make people laugh. And hence, it requires a lot of hard work. There is, just the understanding of the craft. It is very different from making your friends laugh. It's very different from making your family members laugh, because there is context. Everybody knows each other. This is about getting up on stage and making a ranked stranger look at you and then hear you and laugh, right? And that's where the complications come in. And like any other field, I guess, where you start off or you want to kind of master that field, there's a tremendous amount of hard work. I think I have worked harder in these last 4 years than I did in the 18 years in my corporate life. And I'm not making this statement lightly. I used to really work a lot in corporate life, but I think I've worked harder now to just understand the craft of comedy and to be able to get up on stage and perform. So that's one thing. I think there's this, like I said in the beginning, there's this whole notion of romanticizing this whole following your passion bit. It sounds very nice. I quit my life, quit my work in my 40s to follow my passion. It sounds like a movie, but frankly, it is not. I still remember my first 3-4 months. I decided to sit in Starbucks with a MacBook, although I was from Microsoft, but I bought a MacBook because that's what artists do. That was what was told to me, that artists sit with a MacBook in a coffee shop and somehow art happens. So I actually sat in coffee shops for like first 3-4 months and just sitting there doing nothing. Like I was trying to write, I couldn't because I didn't understand comedy then. I would watch people come in, walk out. I would actually, during the day, I would even see people having meetings at Starbucks, and I would look at that and think, yeah, that used to be my life. It is tough. It is very, very tough. I think the number of highs and lows that you get in a day when you're starting something on your own, especially from scratch, are mind-boggling. So there's a lot of hard work involved. There is, if anybody is jumping into any field, especially comedy, for the jazz of it, for the entertainment value, for being a celebrity, please don't. Right? Seriously, don't. Come in if you truly, truly love the idea of making people laugh. I think that's one of the things that you should do. The second aspect is around commercials. And I think I'm told there are a lot of parents and a lot of teachers out here. And I know it's a very logical thought to have, saying, is there any money in comedy? And I'll also address this whole notion of, is comedy a good career? And when I say good, it is this notion of, hey, a lot of comedians get up on stage and they give galis or talk nonsense, and that's not what I want my kid to do or myself to do. It's not that. I think like in any field, there are different kinds of people. You make your own choices in terms of the kind of comedy you want to do. In terms of money, stand-up comedy in India, in its form that we do, has been around for almost 11 years now. And I think the first 5 or 6 years were very difficult for everyone who was there. I came in when comedy was just taking off, so I was kind of lucky. And I think right now, I would put it at par with Bollywood. At some level. Like, I'm not talking about Shah Rukh Khan and all, but at some level, at par with Bollywood in terms of having a career like that where you make money. There also, what happens when you get into comedy, and if you're doing well and if your content is appreciated, there are a lot of other things that you can do along with it, which are part of the creative spectrum, so to say. Like, for example, right now I'm writing a web series, which I hope to pitch to Netflix or Amazon, and hope to act in it, because everybody wants to act in web series. And I'm also doing a podcast, which comes on Spotify. So there's money involved. There's money involved in writing for movies, writing for web series, stuff like that. And then there is obviously the main pillar of stand-up comedy. And I think commercially, I don't know what to say commercially. I think if anybody has that doubt, please don't. It's a fairly decent field to be in. And I'm saying decent very lightly. There's good money involved. If you're willing to work hard, and if you are accepted by the audiences, then it is one of those fields which is very, very lucrative in terms of a career option, so to say. There is also, like any other career, I guess comedy is something that completely depends on you as an individual, because the art form itself is about that, is about what I feel, and the way I see the world is what I go and tell on stage, right? And that hopefully makes people laugh. So it's a very individualistic kind of a profession. You do collaborate with people, but largely you're on your own, which also means that it's a blank slate. You can literally do whatever you want in that creative process. And for me, I think one of the things that I didn't anticipate, which has happened in the past 4 years, has been this whole idea of a blank slate, with nobody telling me that, you can do this, or you're prepared for this, or not prepared for this, or you shouldn't be doing this. Within the creative spectrum, everything is open. So, the means that you have to express yourself creatively, I think stand-up comedy is right at the top, if I may say so, from an individualistic expression perspective. And some very intelligent person had told me that in today's world, it is not the medium that matters. It is the idea that matters. And what that person meant was that, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, if somebody had to get into an entertainment field, they would look at only 2-3 options, right? You had radio, you had television, and that's it, I guess, right? The only 2 options to go there. Now everybody has a phone in their hand. Now we have YouTube. Now we have like so much going around, and hence it's easier to put your craft out in front of people. The only thing is you got to work on the craft bit first. Like I remember when I got into comedy, that was actually May 2016. Uh, Within about 4 months, I released my first YouTube video, because I was very clear that I need people to see me and to kind of understand what kind of comedy that I do, which is very early for a comedian to put out a video. But I did my first solo show in like 5-6 months of being into comedy. I was rushing through a lot of it, primarily also because I was 43 and I thought that I didn't have so much time in terms of building a career. But it was also about taking risks. It's about putting yourself out there, saying, hey, let me try this. Let me create a joke or a bit or a set and just put it out there and see how the audience responds. And if not, then I will make changes, right? That ability to take risks, that ability to try out something, that ability to think differently, attempt something, and then be just happy with the attempt, even if it fails. I think that is one of those things that you need to inculcate, especially in comedy, and otherwise also if you're starting off trying to do something new in life. In corporate life, they say a lot that think out of the box, try out different things. And I heard it for 18 years. And trust me, I never saw very great examples of anybody doing it really like in the true spirit of thinking out of the box. But creative field allows you to do that. That's the other thing that I want to talk about. One of the things that I've noticed with other comedians, especially younger comedians who are coming into comedy because they see this now as a career, is that they want to jump into comedy at a very early stage. Like I hear a lot of comedians talking about, not comedians like the upcoming or wanting to be comedians. These guys come in and say, I want to quit my engineering, or I want to quit my college or MBA, or I've had 1 year work experience. I want to quit that. I feel that's not the right approach. Primarily because the job of a comedian is to go up on stage and talk about his or her experiences, right? And if you don't have experiences in life, if you haven't been to college, if you haven't been to a hostel, or if you haven't done your MBA, or if you haven't worked anywhere, or if you haven't had relationships or gotten married or had kids, those are all experiences that eventually help you, create content for the right audiences. And that's one of the things. So if there's any young person who's right now saying that I want to quit my college and get into comedy, please don't, because then you'll have nothing to talk about. You'll just have school to talk about, I guess. And that's not good enough, right? Go through life, experience it, maybe try comedy in parallel, get the stage experience, fail a zillion times as we all do when we start off. And then with your experiences, with everything that you have seen, create your perspective and become a comedian. I think that's the right approach to do it. Second, advice that I normally give to comedians, upcoming comedians especially, is have the business sense to run a business. It is an artistic field. There's no doubt about it. Okay. We are all artists, but there is this whole image of this artist which has been created, another romantic image which has been created. This guy with long hair, smoking all the time or drinking all the time, always in this artistic mode. It's not true. Okay. It's not true. I know a lot of comedians who are regular people who do regular work, have families like I do. But what they also have on top to become successful is a sense of how to run this comedy business. That's extremely important. If you're getting into any art form, know where the money is. You can't get into it just for the romantic aspect of it and say I'm an artist, because you will survive as an artist for a few years. And then when it becomes tougher, when you see other people becoming successful, that entire, the frustration will be too much for you to handle, especially in a world which is, made up of celebrities, so to say. So please have the business sense of understanding how money is made in comedy. Like when I came into comedy, I was very clear that the money comes from corporate shows. Initially, at that point, the money used to only come from corporate shows. And I made a conscious call in terms of creating material that I thought would be suitable for corporate audiences. I not that it was in my nature to use cuss words, etc. on stage, but I consciously also said that even if I wanted to, I would not. It will be clean comedy. It will be comedy that a family can see, those kind of things. And that helped me get more business because it was a wider audience that I could cater to. It was also about creating your own brand. These days, you all know, especially in lockdown, the amount of content that comes on WhatsApp and on Facebook feeds and Instagram is crazy, right? How do you create your own brand in that whole ocean of content that is just flowing through your screen non-stop all the time? How do you make someone pause and say, hey, this guy, he's interesting, right? So this whole idea of creating brand, working on it, has to come from a business sense. If you feel that you're not business inclined, I had the advantage of working in corporate life for 18 years, so I guess I was to a certain extent. But if you feel you're not, then get someone to help you out. Get a career, or get a manager, or get somebody to coach you to help understand the business of comedy. I think extremely important. Being an artist alone is fun, but you can't make a career out of it. So please understand where money is made. I don't know how much time I have. I think I'm done with the 15 minutes. So I don't know if there's any question answers and stuff that anybody wants to ask. But I just want to kind of summarize what I was trying to say. And I hope I've landed the message. It will be very weird if a comedian, a guy who lives off speaking, is not able to. But let me summarize this, okay? Comedy is a great career to be in. It is one of those industries which is flourishing right now, and it will continue to flourish. The amount of money is crazy. If you do your work properly, if you are true to your art form, if you're willing to spend nights after nights on stage learning the craft first, and then also understanding the business side of how it works and being smart enough to form a career out of it, then it is a great career to have. Please don't come into this for the love of cameras or the selfies that fans take or the cheer that happens every time you go out in public. Don't do it. Those are the wrong reasons to be into any field for that matter. And a lot of people around you will think you're crazy. They will think you've taken a crazy decision, especially parents. My parents really thought. My dad was like, the first thing my dad told me when I quit was, "Fir itna padhai karne ka fayda kya tha?" Right? You did your engineering MBA, so what was the point? And there was a point, right? There was a point, because everything that I studied and learned and experienced during work has helped me become a better comedian, I guess, and it's helping me become a better comedian as I go along. So come in for the right reasons. It's a proper career, and yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to convey. If there's any question or anything, I don't know, comment, then please over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Anshu. We've had a couple of people requesting us that would you make them laugh, but that today you are here as an expert in your craft, as somebody who has done it phenomenally well. And we wish you greater success in the days to come. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Anshu Mor, the stand-up comedian. The gentleman next has been somebody who's followed his passion into academics and has been there for 44 years across various institutions and served the craft of education with phenomenal distinction. It is my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Philip Burrett. Mr. Burrett retired as the Deputy Headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving across various institutions. He served the Doon School as Housemaster, Head of Department, Dean of Student Welfare, Dean of Activities, Deputy Headmaster, Second Master, and Acting Headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Burrett qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College in UK in the year 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. Mr. Burrett, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Subayu. Am I audible?
Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah. So good evening to you, to Achin, to our esteemed panel. and all those wonderful people who have tuned in this evening. So the road less traveled. When I heard the topic, I thought literally of the poem by Robert Frost. It's about this, journeying man who comes across a path, and the particular thing is the last line of the poem, which says that he traveled the other path, and that was what made all the difference. So what it means to me is that choosing an alternative path may lead to the fulfillment that you're looking for. So in all our lives, we come across the crossroads, uh, not one, but many. There are crossroads at many junctions of our life, not just at 23 when you're choosing a job. There are crossroads to choose colleges, careers, marriages, so many things. And it all comes down to the choices we make. We often fear making choices. This is the dilemma faced by all, because when we choose one, it means the death of the other. You choose one car, you can't buy another car. You choose one wife, you may not be, lucky enough to have another one. But these days, let me tell you that, I attended a meeting once that was given by Arun Shori, who said that in your days, Mr. Burrett, you chose one career because Rolling Stones gathered no moss. Today, and I'm addressing a lot of young people who may be tuned in, today you will have as many as 6 to 7 careers in a lifespan. Not, not like what I was told, stick to one job. Today you will change jobs. So choice is always difficult. And that's why we leave it to others sometimes. This whole thing about dad knows best is a way of handing your choice to your father. So you have someone to blame if things go wrong. Now, to many people who, they travel the path laid out by others. And even if they lead to success in whatever way you define success, you may fail to find happiness. And history is rife with stories of people who live seemingly perfect lives, but who are unfulfilled at the end. And as a schoolmaster, let me tell you, I have plenty of stories of children who went to that US college, did that degree that the parents wanted, worked a little while in Wall Street, became successful corporate bankers, but then after some time came back and did what their hearts told them they wanted to do, and for which their dad wouldn't have paid 40,000 US dollars for. The entire midlife crisis that is set to hit men in their 40s um, uh, is about men being bored at a certain stage in their lives. They're sick and tired of this mundane existence that they have been living for decades. And nothing seems to make sense. All the money they made, the jobs, the success. And so these men take a 180-degree turn and shock everybody around them as they set into the sunset. They walk into the sunset and they live a different life. They turn to religion. Some come out of the closet about their sexuality, and they do things that people are shocked by. And it's almost like they have climbed the ladder of success, but to find later on that this ladder has been against the wrong wall all the time. In his book on futuring, mentor and healer Stefan Herman talks about the bright future and the brilliant future. A bright future is a man who's achieved a bright future is exactly this: a man who's got 2 cars, he's got kids in university, and he's got a fantastic home, but he's not happy and fulfilled. And a brilliant future is one where a man finds himself, no matter what he's doing, he finds brilliance in what he does. For me, the road less traveled means to be brave enough to follow your heart. As Joseph Campbell puts it in his book, he says, follow your bliss, follow your bliss. And recently, I follow a lot of what Joseph Campbell says. He's a mythologist and a psychiatrist. And Joseph Campbell, I'll just talk to him about him a little later. But when I see people like Alex Hanault, the gentleman who featured in that film, that rock climbing film, Mother Teresa too. Mother Teresa was a simple nun with the Loreto order. When she made a career choice, and she changed when she was in her 30s to become a missionary of charity. Um, um, it is not about right or wrong or idealizing the tough and unfamiliar. it's the motivation that leads to our choices and the patterns and compulsions that we are affected by. We either accept these as challenges or at least be aware of what we are doing. Now, what is the source of this motivation that changed the course of our lives? What is the motivation that leads people to doing what they do differently? What triggered it? Is it defiance? Is it rebellion? Is it anger with parents, as you saw in the movie Into the Wild, where Chris McCandless just travels into Canada and lives in the wilderness? Is it boredom? Like, certain writers like Frank McNaught, who wrote Angela's Ashes, was so bored as a school teacher that suddenly he was thrown into a new situation. Or like Viktor Frankl, who was incarcerated in the prisoner of war camps in Dachau, what did he do? He developed a new philosophy and a new psychology called logotherapy. Sometimes it's the wasteland that we live in, the utter boredom and ennui, the hollowness of our existing way, where we need a trigger that pushes us to move differently, to take a new step. It was an inspirational school teacher of mine who urged me to quit the science and engineering line that I thought of pursuing. My father was an engineer. I thought I'd be an engineer. And he told me to follow a career of being a teacher. So in a way, I followed the road less traveled. He told me that it would be a difficult journey, but a worthwhile one. And in a way, my school gave me a love for sport that I pursued. And I was an endurance runner for many years, till a very severe accident cut short my career in a matter of seconds. But I returned to my profession as a teacher, and I was still able to, within my profession, do many road trips and do many strange and stupid adventures because I was inspired by the Bonningtons and the Knox Johnsons and the Thor Heyerdahls that I read about as a schoolboy. Coming back to the mythologist Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell talks about different steps in the hero's journey. He talks about the call to adventure. This call to adventure could be an illness, a loss, an accident, some suffering, the death of a loved one. And we are nudged to take the call. We could refuse the call, but then what happens is we have to wait for a second call, or we refuse to grow. After taking the call, we meet many hurdles along the way, many obstacles, but we learn and grow. And along this journey, we meet helpers who come to our rescue. And finally, we return home like Ulysses after the Odysseus, after the long journey, the Odyssey. Because the hero's journey has three parts: the separation, the initiation, and the integration, the returning home. It's very important. In a movie that I saw and a book that I would prescribe to everyone, The Motorcycle Diaries, it's a story about an 8,000-kilometer journey across South America taken by Ernesto Guevara and his friend Alberto Granado. It's a classic call to adventure. Now, this young man could have pursued his career as a doctor that he was training to be. But he decided to take this long journey on a ramshackled motorbike that broke down halfway. His friend returned, but Che, who he later turned out to be the famous Che Guevara, took the journey alone. And in this journey, he discovered who he was. He discovered the suffering that capitalism had thrust onto the poor in Central America. And we all know what Che went on to do. What is the value in following your own life, your own journey, the road less traveled? Well, there's a parable in the Bible that says that once a man has found his goal or his dream, he will sell everything to pursue this dream. There is no price that is too much to pay. And Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, coined the term individuation. Now, individuation is basically a quest that we all are on. It is the quest to actualize oneself, to achieve one's potential and become the person that we were designed to be. It is the completion of the individual's personality, which is achieved by bringing into consciousness unconscious aspects of ourselves. Only those who are on their own individual paths will get anywhere near some degree of individuation. So as a teacher, I would urge the teachers who are listening in to say, help students to find themselves. Very often, a good school is a place where a student will find his career in the hobbies and out of class activities. In the photography and the art and the music. It is here that they find their calling and career in life. It's not the history and physics and the English. And therefore, good schools are places where you find yourself and maybe your alternative path. Choosing the path less traveled does not happen only when you're 25. As I said before, it can come at any time. You can have career shifts. It's never too late. And yet, choosing the road less traveled doesn't have to be very different and unique. There are simple people living simple lives, but finding magic and fulfillment in the ordinary. And really, I would say finding extraordinary in the ordinary is the thing that I would advocate. Uh, I'm taken back to a clip in the movie Gandhi, where Gandhi is in this ashram and he is helping heal the wound of a little goat, while Nehru and Jinnah and all the rest of the bigwigs are waiting to talk about something serious. Gandhi puts them on hold and is tending to the broken leg of a little goat. That is what I would call finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Thank you very much. Over to you, Shubai.
Thank you so much, sir, for that lovely piece about following dreams and about finding alternative meaning in life. We move on now to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Achin Bhattacharyya, who's the founder and CEO of Notebook. Achin himself is one of those stories of somebody undergoing a career shift and walking the path less traveled. And that's what makes him an entrepreneur today. Achin is a chartered accountant by training, and he was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with a keen interest in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. Achin is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Yeah. Shubhai, am I audible?
Yes, Achin, we can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. I once again welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which is close to everyone's heart. It's about choosing a path that all of us aspire, but very few dare. I also welcome and thank the very diverse panel that you have today. All of them have achieved phenomenal success in their individual spheres after pursuing instinctive and innovative career choices led by passion. Now, while choosing a career, very often more weightage is given to factors like security and stability, and passion often takes a backseat. It really takes a lot to go against the advice of one and all and still achieve success. The biggest hurdle that these trendsetters often face is lack of family and social support, as very few people have the vision and maturity to understand their aspirations. However, these pioneers not only overcome all the odds with their determination, but also set examples for others to follow. Now, it becomes even more difficult when someone decides to take the plunge after achieving considerable success in their conventional careers, as Anshu mentioned. Giving up what you have achieved after years of hard work takes tremendous amount of courage and self-belief. Apart from financial pressure, which may come from existing responsibilities and also cost of an existing lifestyle, social and peer pressure, and everyone questioning the justification of your decision makes it more difficult. But if Columbus would have not set sail, who would have discovered the lands that existed far beyond the immediate horizon that normal vision can take us to? Now, today, we have an excellent gathering here. There are a lot of senior educators here. So let me take this opportunity to send across a message. If we sit back and think for once, the future leaders who will decide the trajectory of our planet few decades from now are in school and are being mentored by esteemed educators like you. Since we have such an august gathering of educators and parents who are instrumental in shaping the future of our Gen Next, it is important that we use this opportunity to take an united pledge to build a more creative and dynamic educational ecosystem. Now, I firmly believe that apart from parents, teachers are always the biggest support for a student, and they have a huge role in shaping a child's future and influencing his decisions with regard to career choices. So let us see what it takes to be there and how each one of us can contribute in mentoring and nurturing these trendsetters under our wings, who may be leaders for tomorrow. Now, another very important aspect is exposure. We need to encourage our students to be curious. Let them not look at education with an end objective of only scoring well, but also develop their interests in various topics, so that in their quest for knowledge, they can actually develop interest in various topics. Now, I always feel that learning by and large beyond the age is self-learning, and the role of a teacher is in introducing a topic in a way which makes it attractive for a student and gives the student the access or hints about where to look for more information. For instance, at Notebook, in literature, for each topic that we cover, we always make it a point to talk a little about the author and his or her other work. The objective is to develop a student's reading interest so that they can embark on a self-exploration journey. Mere academic pursuits will seldom develop the kind of interest that reference to real-life examples can. For example, we visually demonstrate the concept of finding a sugar jar in a kitchen shelf while introducing coordinate geometry. And that makes the whole topic far more relevant. Let us build a generation which will not study anything for the sake of studying it, and will have the courage and conviction of questioning the practical utility of whatever they study. As educators, let us have the patience and confidence of handling all their queries with grace and composure. Now, in today's age, the role of a student has undergone a sea change. And the student is no longer a passive recipient of one-sided teaching, but an active co-creator of knowledge. Hence, as part of the educational ecosystem, we need to encourage debates and discussions. Unlike popular perception, this is actually implemented in many schools. My role as an entrepreneur and founder of one of the fastest growing edtech brands in India takes me to various schools in different parts of the country. And I can say this with a lot of conviction that the kind of confidence I see in school students of today is remarkable. And this is not restricted to metro cities alone. Everywhere that I've traveled, I see the kind of confidence, the attitude to question. Now, a large part of this confidence is attributable to the positive and proactive attitude of our teachers. And I really congratulate them for this. Now, another very important aspect is counseling. Teachers have a great role in it. A student can, now, they can actually help a student by counseling him and helping him or her make up their mind. Very often children need someone who can lend them their ears without judging them and speak to them logically and neutrally. Now, a teacher, given their close proximity, is often best placed to take up this role. Now, what happens with parents is that very often they're influenced by family expectations and other practical challenges. At Notebook, we work very actively with a lot of child counselors, and we take their valued inputs on various aspects. And I must admit that they add tremendous value to the whole process. In fact, in near future, we do plan to work more on this aspect with the support of some of the best minds in child counseling in the country. Now, it is important to promote new extracurricular activities and try our best to actually ensure all-round development of a child. Now, today, if we sit back and think for a while, we are teaching our students for jobs, majority of which do not even exist. And unless we are flexible enough to look beyond our textbooks, how will new thoughts and creativity come? Thus, I'll again say that let's take a united pledge to be more receptive towards new ideas. I honestly believe that it's never too late to take the plunge to pursue your passion. We do need to come to terms with the fact that everyone will not follow the conventional route. And at times, it's necessary to give up on what we have in order to pursue something which we believe in. Mid-career shifts in spite of doing well in earlier, more conventional jobs is really commendable. And it demonstrates free spirit and the confidence to start from zero. Now, I honestly feel that money can't be the sole motivator. We need to chase excellence in whatever we decide to do, and the rest will naturally follow. I think the most important element is love that you have for your chosen domain. Do you really enjoy what we are doing? If the answer is yes, sustained effort will naturally come in. Now today, we are here to applaud the free spirits of ladies and gentlemen who have combined their passion with profession. In the process, they have not followed set standards. Rather, they have set standards for themselves and benchmarks which others will follow for generations to come. I thank you all for giving me patient hearing. I look forward to deliberations from our esteemed panelists on this very interesting topic, which I am sure will motivate many to take up the road not taken. Thank you. Over to you, Shubhai.
Thank you so much, Achin, for those views. And with that, from the classroom and the education, we will now move into the mountains. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the father-daughter duo that all of you have been waiting for. It is my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Ajeet Bajaj and Deeya Bajaj. Ajeet Bajaj is a mountaineer, adventurer, explorer, entrepreneur, and a motivational speaker. He is the first Indian to have completed the polar trilogy by skiing to the North Pole, the South Pole, and across Greenland. In May 2018, Mr. Bajaj and his daughter, Deeya, became the first Indian father-daughter duo to summit Mount Everest. In a country where the girl child is often neglected, they wanted to spread the message that any girl, given the right opportunities, can reach the most difficult of summits. They are also the first and only father-daughter duo in the world to have climbed Mount Everest from the more difficult north side in Tibet. Mr. Bajaj was conferred the Padma Shri by the President of India in 2012 for his 30 years of experience in adventure sports and for pioneering various adventure sports in the country, including river rafting, kayaking, and sea kayaking in India. He has also been felicitated with the Hall of Fame Awards by the Indian Association of Tour Operators and Adventure Tour Operators Association of India. He has summited 6 of the 7 summits, that is Vinson Massif, Mount Everest, Mount Elbrus, Mount Aconcagua, Mount Kilimanjaro, and Mount Kosciuszko. I hope I'm getting that right, which are the highest mountains in Antarctica, Asia, Europe, South America, Africa, and Australia, respectively. He captained the international team for World Whitewater Rafting Championships in Turkey in 1994 and has done a number of first descents of rivers in India and is considered a pioneer of river rafting, kayaking, and sea kayaking. He has conducted over 50 adventure courses for the Indian Armed Forces. It is also my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you his daughter, Deeya Bajaj. Deeya holds a Bachelor of Sciences degree in Natural Resources from the Cornell University in New York. She has worked for Snow Leopard Adventures and Adventure Nation, which are organizations that Mr. Bajaj started and now heads. She was felicitated in a personal ceremony by the President of India and has had honorable mention by the Honorable Prime Minister of India in his podcast for being a part of the first Indian father-daughter duo to climb Mount Everest. She featured in Pandora's Women of the Year 2019 and Chandigarh Rotary Club Shreyas Award 2019 in recognition for challenging gender norms and successfully climbing Mount Everest. She won the Adventurer of the Year award from the Adventure Tour Operators Association of India in 2013 and Mary Dilli Award in 2011 in the category of sports for being the youngest in the world to ski across the Greenland ice cap. I could go on and on about the phenomenal achievements of this adventurer father-daughter duo, but I believe you are far more interested in hearing it from them directly. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, Padma Shri Mr. Ajeet Bajaj and Deeya Bajaj. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Introduction.
Thank you. Can we, Subhayu, can we share our screen? Can you hear us good?
Yes, sir. We hear you. We can see you fine. Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Subhayu, and good evening. I'd like to begin by saying that I'm very lucky. I have the best profession on the planet. When I graduated from college, I went to St. Stephen's College in Delhi University, and all my friends were getting real jobs in the real world. And when I told them that I was going to follow my passion and get into adventure, they thought that I had lost it completely. This is how I commute to work. That's 400 meters across the Ganga River, Leopard Heights in the Garhwal Himalaya. Today, my friends do acknowledge that I do actually have the best profession on the planet. If you're passionate about what you do, you don't actually work for a single day of your life. One of the people who really had a big impact in my life was Edmund Hillary. And in the world of adventure, we feel that he climbed heights higher than Mount Everest for the great work he did for the Sherpa people of Nepal, building schools and hospitals for them, post his Everest climb with Sherpa Tenzing. This quest for adventure has taken me down some of the wildest rivers on the planet, across 6 continents, kayaking and whitewater rafting. This is one of the wildest rivers in the world. This is the Zambezi River. You see a 16-foot raft going into a rapid. This river demarcates the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And you start this rafting trip just below Victoria Falls, which is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. But what makes rafting here very exciting is the presence of these crocodiles in the calm pools below the big rapids. I got into climbing when I was in school. I was inspired by my teachers at the Lawrence School, Sanaa, and I celebrated my 21st birthday on the summit of a 23,000-foot mountain. It was more luck and coincidence than anything else. And what you see is I'm actually cutting a chocolate on the summit along with a very dear friend and a mentor in climbing. This is on a ski expedition to ski to the geographical North Pole. You ski on a thin layer of ice on the Arctic Ocean. And here goes the flag. Oh, shit. Pardon my language there. I was filming and I had to stop abruptly and go and help, but luckily all was good. But people do invariably ask me why I do this. And I think right there, looking at this photograph makes me want to go right back. And I think you have an answer. Just that feeling of being out there in pristine wilderness, thousands of miles away from our so-called civilization, where you only have a few polar bears for company, um, and being able to, I think that people talk about conquering nature. I think the only conquest you do is from within. Um, but just that big nature connect, I think, and being with a team and taking challenges head on, I think it's a fantastic feeling. And for those of you who are still not convinced, my answer is very simple. Try it and you will know why. That is the geographical North Pole, 90 degrees north latitude, the very top of our planet. I was lucky in being able to achieve a childhood dream, becoming the first Indian to actually ski to the North Pole. A few months later, I was invited to join an expedition to ski to the South Pole, and we got into perhaps the most horrific conditions on the planet. What you see here is a storm, and with temperatures going down to minus 45, minus 50 degrees Celsius, it does become a battle for survival. But this is my photograph taken at the geographical North Pole. I'm frozen stiff. It was really cold, about minus 40 degrees Celsius. I don't know if you can tell, but through my frozen mask, that I am smiling. And smiling because these expeditions were a childhood dream. I had read about these famous explorers like Scott, Amundsen, Nansen, and Shackleton. And working hard, facing adversity and challenges, and making a dream come true gives you a lot of inner peace, happiness, and joy that no amount of money or anything in life uh, can balance. So that was a very happy moment. And I must admit, I thought I knew what the spirit of adventure was all about till I got my two best adventure buddies, my two daughters. Now, the typical mindset was that, oh, girls, will they be able to join you on adventure? But I've been very lucky. We scuba dive, we go skiing, we go climbing, kayaking. And this video that you see was with my two daughters, Deeya and Meghna, to wish my wife a happy birthday. We were about 20 meters underwater. That's my elder daughter, Deeya. Both my daughters enjoy adventure, but Deeya thrives on the more extreme adventure, the harder, the more extreme, the better. That's a photo of her kayaking a river called the Moose in the US. And well, when Deeya was all of 14 years, I took her on our first major expedition. This was a sea kayaking expedition along the fjords of West Greenland. With that, I'd like to hand over to Deeya.
So growing up with a dad like this, I didn't really have much of an option when it came to adventure. It was something that, all of our family holidays involved, waking up early, going somewhere, doing something active. And I must admit, initially, I used to be a bit resistant to it because, oftentimes you'd have to wake up very, very early and, to go out and do these activities. But somewhere along the line, I really started to love it. I started to realize that there was a lot that adventure was teaching me. It was giving me essential life skills and a learning that was so, so valuable. Things such as, how important it is to stay connected with the people around you and, to sort of take a digital detox. When you'd go out on these expeditions, there'd be weeks on end where you wouldn't have access to technology. And then the types of connects you'd make with your expedition team members, they were just absolutely fantastic. And I think, just over 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the type of friendships you'd make would be a lot more meaningful than friends longer. The second thing that was super interesting and I think very relevant to some of the conversations that are happening, especially right now, is adventure taught me that, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from or, what language you speak. at the end of the day, when you're out there and you're doing these activities together and you're, undergoing some of the most challenging conditions that Mother Nature can throw at you, you realize that we're all humans, and there's an essential humanity that just connects us all. And sometimes I think, when you look at outer differences, it's very easy to forget about that if you're looking at where the person's from or religion or race or, whatever it is. And I think adventure was really, really amazing, because it taught me, that it didn't matter. At the end of the day, you got along well with everyone and you had such a great time, and you were all just bonding over the shared experience. And that was absolutely amazing. The other thing that I think adventure really did was that it connected me with the outside world, right? And with the fact that we have this big, beautiful planet that we need to take care of. I think it's very easy to live in the city and forget that there is a wilderness out there that is suffering because of our actions. And when you go out to one of these more extreme areas or more remote parts of our planet, you can firsthand see the effects of global warming. So this is in fact in Greenland, which is one of the northernmost parts of our planet. And you can see that I'm wearing a bug net, and there is actually a mosquito that you can see on the screen. And this is because actually when we were out and we were camping, there was actually a huge number of mosquitoes out there. And I remember we spoke to the local people, the Inuits, and they told us that the number of bugs and insects had increased drastically over the years, again, because of global warming. But we were out, on sea kayaking amongst the fjords of Greenland. And I remember we saw the Greenland ice cap. And I think I made this offhand statement to Dad. I said, Dad, it would be so cool to come back here and actually see the ice cap one day. But the thing is, with a dad like mine, you can't really make these offhand statements, because 3 years later, we actually did come back to Greenland, and this time on an intense cross-country skiing expedition where we would be skiing 550 kilometers, skiing across the Greenland ice cap from the west to the east coast. Dad and I were going to be the first Indians to actually attempt this. And I was at that time the youngest in the world to attempt this. So definitely we spent a lot of time training and preparing and planning for the expedition. It was, about 8 hours of skiing every day for skiing about 30 kilometers. And then you'd stop, set up camp. It was like living in a deep freeze, minus 30 degrees Celsius was the ambient temperature. And it was very cool because we were above the Arctic Circle. And so it was actually 24 hours of daylight. And that was definitely an amazing experience. No matter what time you would wake up, the middle of the night would still be quite bright outside. And, speaking of how cold it was, this is one of our team members, Tony from New Zealand. And we used to call him the walrus because this would happen to him very often. And I don't know if any of you can guess what it is that is on his mustache, but it's not snot and it's not sweat. It's actually the condensation from his breath, because that's how cold it used to get. Of course, unfurling our national flag was a very, very exciting moment for both Dad and I. And it was a very, very proud moment too. Not only because of, the fact that we had completed this extremely rigorous expedition, but also because this was because our expedition was associated with a cause that was a little bit bigger. We were actually using this expedition to raise funds for a children's home, to bring in girls to a children's home, which was originally only for boys. And, growing up in a family where girls were encouraged just as much as boys, I found it very surprising when I visited this home that it was only for boys. And so with the help of my parents, we were able to convince the management to bring in some girls. They were worried about taking the responsibility initially, but we convinced them, and eventually they did agree. And they said, okay, we'll bring in girls if you bring in the funds. So I used this expedition to raise funds by asking people to pledge money for every kilometer that we skied. So even if people pledged, say, 1 rupee, skiing 550 kilometers, it became 550 rupees. And that way we were actually, through our family, friends, through my school, we were able to raise 10 lakhs and bring in 12 little girls into the home. And I think that's another amazing thing about adventure, is how much it connects you to this very basic part of life, and you realize how lucky we are, how fortunate we are when you're just living in the most basic conditions. And it does, I think, inspire within you an urge to give back, and in however and whichever way you possibly can. So the adventures continued, and after I graduated from high school, Dad and I climbed Mount Elbrus. That was my graduating from high school present. And then after that, I went off to university, and I remember Dad came to visit me. And while we were there, we both started talking about, climbing and all of our expeditions together. And I don't even remember who brought it up. But of course, Everest was brought up. I think when you grow up in the field of adventure, Everest is something that all the books that you read are about, all the movies that you watch, there's so many mentions, so many explorers that you look up to. Everest is in the forefront, and it had been a childhood dream for both Dad and I. So one of us brought it up, and suddenly, from a dream, it started to slowly materialize into a reality. Of course, we did spend 2 years training for this expedition. I think we're very, very clear that you can't take any expedition lightly, and especially a climb like Everest, which has not the best reputation when it comes to mortality rates. We had to do a lot of training to firstly convince my mom that we were both prepared and ready to go. But also so that we were mentally, 100% certain that we had done everything we possibly could to make sure that we were safe on the mountain. I think there's often a lot of glamour associated with mountaineering. And it is, once you climb, it's the most exhilarating, amazing feeling. But, there is a lot of hard work. There is a lot of stress, and a lot of, and it is difficult. And so, you do have to train for that and prepare for situations to make sure that you're 100% safe on the mountains. So we actually did our 4 practice expeditions before climbing Everest. And this was the first one. We were climbing a mountain called Kangyatse in Ladakh. And then we went to Nepal, and we tried on a lot of our equipment, and we did another high altitude climb. And then after that, we went to France, and we actually did a lot of technical work. And, we did things like crevasse rescue and what we would do in case of avalanches. So we wanted to prepare for all possibilities that we could possibly face on the mountain. And this is actually me ice climbing on a frozen waterfall. And our 4th and final expedition was actually back to Ladakh. And it was it was an amazing, amazing experience, because during our high altitude climb, we actually got to see the elusive snow leopard. And as some of you might know, the gray ghost of the Himalayas is one of the most difficult animals to spot. And so it definitely felt like, a very good omen of sorts to see this during our expedition. So after 2 years of eating, sleeping, and breathing Everest, we finally made it to base camp. And, when you reach base camp on the north side of Mount Everest, you can actually see the summit of the mountain. And, a lot of people talk about conquering mountains or conquering Mother Nature. At this point, I really would like to say that, when you reach base camp and you look at this big, beautiful mountain in front of you, you realize that us humans were so small and insignificant compared to the big, beautiful mountain in front of you. You only climb. You have to realize that being able to climb is something that, you should feel fortunate to be able to go and have this opportunity, but you should never go in with this sort of like conquering mindset, because that can only lead to very, very dangerous consequences. The mountain isn't going to let you climb if she doesn't want to. So we actually have this big prayer ceremony before we actually go further up the mountain. And it's just about paying your respects to the mountain before you try to go any further up. And this is what the route up to the summit looks like. So an expedition to Mount Everest can take anything from 6 weeks to 2 months. And the reason why it takes so long is because imagine you were to find this magic helicopter that takes you directly to the summit. Upon reaching the summit and getting out, you would actually die within 4.5 minutes because of the low levels of oxygen. So what you're doing is you're actually moving up very, very slowly, taking your time, and letting your body get used to the low levels of oxygen at each camp. So you actually spend a week at base camp, you climb a little bit further up, you spend a week at advanced base camp, you climb up to North Col and climb up a little bit further, and then come all the way back down to base camp and wait there until there's a clear weather window to then go all the way up. So this is now what the route up looks like. The terrain, slowly from this mixed rock starts to change. It becomes more and more icy. This is what advanced base camp looks like. And yaks can go up till advanced base camp, but everything beyond this, you are carrying yourself on your back. As you can see, there are now this huge wall of snow and ice that you have to climb up. And this is sort of where the climbing starts to get a lot more serious. This is a picture of what it looks like to climb that the North Col. And it's pretty vertical climbing. You're taking 2 or 3 steps and then stopping for a deep breath. And it's definitely difficult. This is what it looks like climbing up.
So I must admit that during the day when I would see Deeya climbing, I'd be extremely proud. But whenever I was alone in my tent at night, I would be worried, a very worried father, wondering, what am I doing? While we had trained really hard and ensured that we don't take any chances, but then again, there are so many things on Everest that are beyond your normal control. This is the North Col, and when you come out of your tent, you have to always be anchored onto a rope, because on the left side, as you can see, there's a crevice, and on the right side, there is a drop of 2,000 feet all the way back down to advanced base camp. So we came up to all the way to the North Col. We rested for a little while. We did this without using any supplemental oxygen, came back down to base camp, rested for a few days, waited for a clear weather window, and started on our way back up again. And when we were climbing somewhere close to 8,000 meters, which is called the death zone on Mount Everest, you can see Mount Everest between the two climbers. We got into this massive storm. So it did become a battle for survival. The temperature dropped to minus 50 degrees Celsius. We were about 2 hours away from our camp. There's no way you can turn around and go back. You have to keep going. And this is where I would like to share our secret formula for success on these extreme expeditions. It's an acronym called PODS. And not only does it help you succeed on some of these very trying, difficult, extreme expeditions, but also helps in life as well. This acronym called PODS stands for, the P stands for preparation. Confucius spoke about it in the 6th century BC, and this was all about hard work and training for 2 years. Everything about our equipment, our gear, logistics, Sherpa team, everything under the sun, and hard physical workouts. Deeya spoke about our 4 training expeditions as well. O stands for your outlook. I do believe that not only on expeditions, but winners in life are people who have a very positive outlook to life. D is for being deliberate. We were in an error-free environment, and you have to follow all rules to the T. One single mistake, and it's not just while climbing on an expedition to Mount Everest, but the same holds true today, because we are living in a coronavirus situation. And I think we have to be deliberate. We have to be very mindful about all the rules and follow them to the T. And deliberate also about how we spoke to each other. As I said earlier, I do believe winners in life live on a very high positive energy plane. And the way you interact with each other, if it's positive and supportive, I think you can get through any storm. S was for a support system. Whenever you're out there in life, ready to take a risk, you do need a very solid support system. Our family, our friends back home, our colleagues, and of course, on the expedition, we had each other and our Sherpa buddies as well. So when we got to the camp, this is called the death zone at 8,000 meters because we human beings aren't supposed to be there. And if something does go wrong, then there is no such thing as rescue up here. Our tents were buried in snow. We got in and the storm started out again. We thought we were going to get blown off the mountain. So we didn't sleep all night. Luckily, the weather gods were kind. And at about 6 in the morning, the storm abated. We slept for a little while, forced ourselves to eat and drink, and then carried on up the mountain. Forced ourselves to eat and drink because you lose your appetite completely at high altitude. So if any of you out there would like to eat whatever you want to eat and still lose a lot of weight, I would strongly recommend an expedition to climb one of the big 8,000 meter mountains. As you can see here, we are using oxygen. We got to our summit camp in the afternoon, rested for a little while, and we started climbing at night. It was minus 50 degrees Celsius when we started climbing at night. And it was a very steep slope up the mountain, as you can see. We climbed through the night, and just before we got to the summit, something went wrong with me. I couldn't breathe. We had both been climbing super strong. And finally, I pulled out my mask and I realized that the tube supplying oxygen to the mask had frozen because it was so cold. And we were on a very steep slope, very close to the summit. The summit was perhaps 1.5, 2 hours away. I was climbing with my daughter. Pitch dark, can't breathe, fuzzy brained. What do I do? Now, I did know that Deeya can't stop because if you stop while you're climbing, you get very cold. I had promised my family that we would be doing this together. We would be supporting each other. So what do I do? It was perhaps one of the hardest decisions of my life, but I decided to let Deeya climb and go on to the summit. And my heart sank when I saw her headlamp going away from me. I was confident that she would do it. As luck would have it, I was very lucky. I radioed for help, and our Sherpa Sardar did have a spare mask. I was able to change the mask and follow Deeya up to the summit.
But as I was climbing, I had no idea what was happening. It was definitely very, very scary because it was still dark. When I turned around, I couldn't see Dad anymore, and I'm climbing. And then I actually reached the summit while it was still dark outside. And it was still dark. And I sat down a little bit before the summit. The winds had died down completely. And I was just looking and waiting for Dad, right? And it was almost then, you know, in all of this, like, I was so worried, I was so anxious. I don't think it even hit me that I had actually reached the summit. And I'm sitting there. And then it was almost as if there was some Bollywood director like hiding behind a rock somewhere, because cue the dramatic music. Just as the sun started to rise, you know, I saw Dad walking towards me. And then both of us like hugged at the summit of Mount Everest, and we both were crying, and it was very dramatic. But a very, very exciting moment for the both of us. Of course, then unfurling our national flag was amazing, primarily because we wanted to show families all over India, you know, climbing as a father-daughter team. We wanted to say that, hey, you know, I think that us girls, we can do a lot, but I think that we can do a whole lot more if our families are supporting us and lifting us up and being sort of a pillar of strength and support for us. So being up top and knowing that we had this message and unfurling the flag together, being there together was just a magical feeling.
And there was one more message we wanted to convey. Of course, like Deeya said, as a father, I do strongly feel that our girls, there is no challenge too big for them. If, as parents, we help them pursue their dreams and then support them with weather those storms in the pursuit of their dreams, I think there is no challenge that our girls cannot take head on. And if we can do this as a country, I do believe if we can harness sensitively this amazing woman power in our country, I think our country can go to the next orbit. Deeya and I were the first parent-child team to climb Mount Everest from the harder north side. And there was one other message we wanted to give out to our fellow Indians. I strongly feel that there is no challenge too big for us Indians. All of us have to work together. The time for our country has come. We are already the world's 5th largest economy. And I think today, as a nation, we are thriving. We are doing very well. Of course, we have a very big challenge today ahead of us, which is managing COVID-19 and a whole lot of other issues like the Chinese incursion into our country. But I think if we are all together, if we work together as a team, we are Indians. And as Indians, let's work together and take our flag, our tricolor, to heights even higher than Mount Everest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bajaj. Thank you so much, Deeya. I was looking at those photographs and my heart swells with pride to see the Indian flag at so many places. And I'm sure I speak for everyone who is listening in that we all thank you for taking it out there. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Well, from the snowy mountains, we will now try to move on to powder with a very different definition. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our next speaker, Ms. Sandhya Shekar. Born in 1984 in Udupi, Karnataka, Sandhya spent her formative years, as most kids growing up in the early 2000s would, studying to be either an engineer or an MBA. She decided to do the latter with an MBA in hand, she got into the world of finance, where she worked with Yes Bank in Singapore for a few years. I beg your pardon, Yes Bank in Bangalore for a few years. Until one day, while flipping through a fashion magazine, she was enamored by the pictures in it, especially the makeup. And that's when she realized her true calling, that is to be a makeup artist. 11 years later, Sandhya has risen steadily to become one of the most sought after makeup artists in the industry today. Her work regularly features on the covers of Vogue, GQ, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and other very, very famous fashion magazines. And she regularly works with the likes of Deepika Padukone, Anushka Sharma, Katrina Kaif, and others. With a hunger for knowledge and a passion to grow as an artist and as an individual, Sandhya doesn't like to rest on her laurels. She believes she's only just getting started. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you Ms. Sandhya Shekar. Sandhya, over to you.
Thank you.
Yes, Sandhya, please go on.
Yeah.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you, Shipayu, for the introduction. I think the introduction has kind of covered quite a bit in terms of what I do, but I'd like to kind of like take you back in terms of how I kind of transition, say, from makeup to getting rather from corporate to like makeup. Well, I grew up in a very small village, I'd say, in down south Karnataka. It's called Udupi, and in Udupi, a very tiny village. And growing up, just like every other South Indians, we were kind of like, being told to be very academic and follow the regular dreams of being, say, doctors or engineers or the stereotypical path. And that's what I did. I think eventually I ended up studying finance and landed up in a couple of, I'd say 3 years in finance role, say before my MBA and after my MBA. And I think somewhere down the line, while I was in it, I realized that corporate culture was not something that was kind of like cut for me, in terms of I just felt that I didn't fit in. And even though I was kind of doing very well at my job. I was a relationship manager at Yes Bank at that point of time. I think it was also those years of post-recession, which was 2008, and markets were really, really bad. But like I said, going back to not fitting into the corporate culture, and I think that's when I started thinking in terms of what next. And the only thing that I could think of was not wanting to have a boss to report to, and that was the only criteria. And I remember kind of like flipping through a magazine while I was at work, and I remember seeing that, okay, this doesn't look that great. I think it was a picture of Priyanka Chopra for Gehenna or something of that sort, and I was like, okay, the aesthetic of this doesn't look fine. And and I already did have an interest in makeup when I was kind of growing up. It was more on myself, and not in terms of doing it on others. And I think also kind of growing up in a small town, I wasn't really aware of the options that were out there. I think it was only when I moved to Bangalore in the year 2005, I was introduced to, say, a couple of people who were in the industry. And that's how my knowledge about this particular field kind of, got better. And I think that's when the flip happens, and the interest of, say, doing makeup on myself kind of changed to, there is a career so and so, and I can kind of do that for a living. And it was as basic as that. And I think when I was kind of quitting Yes Bank, the first thought was obviously about my parents flipping out, them not really understanding the profession. And when I finally came home and told them that, I've quit and I'm kind of like going to become a makeup artist, I think their understanding and knowledge of that was so little, in terms of they thought I was going to be somebody working in a beauty parlor. And they have a word here for that. They call them beauticians. So they asked me if I was going to be a beautician. And I was like, no. But I was trying to kind of like explain to them. And I think the closest that they got was this person who came to my school during my school days. Whenever you have like a school day, you have like painting going on your face. And, they're like, are you going to be that person? I was like, something like that, but not like him. And I think the biggest worry was about why you're leaving a salary job to get into something so unsteady, where you don't even know if you're going to kind of like make money, just like every other parents. But I think I somehow didn't succeed in kind of convincing them. But I kind of like, on my 25th birthday, I kind of like basically stormed out of home, very Bollywood, and ended up in Bangalore, where I kind of, started doing a short-term course. And I continued this for about 2 or 3 months, where I went from Bangalore to Bombay, and then, I kind of did more courses. And the next thing I know, I had done my training, and I was kind of like ready to like, say, assist people in like Bombay. And yeah, I think days just like went by, and the next thing I know, I was kind of assisting people for almost over 8 months. And then I kind of got my first gig with MTV, and that's how it all started. And yeah, all I remember is I just kept working and working and working. And it's been 11 years now, and finally I am where I am right now. So yeah, this is just a little small story of how things kind of like happened to me, or how the transition happened, say, from a corporate job. A lot of them I know who are not really happy in terms of their career. do keep asking me the question of how and what made it possible. And I think for me, what I'd like to say is that you just have to dive into that strong calling. I think we all have hobbies, we all have certain interests that we can think that we can, is going to kind of fulfill our soul. And I think that is something that we need to kind of like dig in a little deeper and understand if this is what I want to do for a living. I recently came across some, I don't know, I think a quote somewhere on Instagram where it said that, the ideal job would be pretty much like picking a hobby and then, trying to like make money off it, because you're not only making money off it, but you're also kind of fulfilling your soul. So it kind of like checks all the list of, having a living as well as having a much more fulfilling career. And I think that apart, I think some of the things that I also keep listening to, say, from friends who want to make that shift is basically the fears that are kind of like attached in terms of, say, letting go of a salary and then how are you going to like survive and things like that. Honestly speaking, I think today we're living in a day and age wherein there's so many options available, but I think there is lack of awareness for a lot of us in terms of how can we, go out there and make a living out of that. And trust me, that's what kept me from going, say, into makeup pretty much after I graduated. Like, I don't think I would have done my master's after my, commerce, but instead I would have invested that time into makeup. I mean, that's just one side of it. But I think a lot of us don't really, we're not really aware of how a lot of these alternative careers kind of like work. And I think it's about time that, we kind of expand our energy. A little bit of it, I think, is also in terms of how our education system is, wherein we all are kind of taught the stereotypical path of, we always shown people who are, say, a doctor or an engineer. There's nothing wrong about it. I'm not saying this, but I don't think we're kind of exposed to anything else. At least this is something that I'm talking purely from my experience. And I think when I moved to, say, a place like Bombay, and when I started working in the industry, I was completely mind boggled with, the amount of professions that were there in kind of in my own industry. And that's something that, when I talk about it to a few of my family and friends, they are really amazed at what people can do and how people can kind of like make living out of. Like, I remember telling within my own profession, we kind of like, say, work with a stylist, we kind of like work with a photographer, we kind of work with hairstylists. There are people who do, say, who are sari drapists, and that is like, they do that for a living, and it's quite lucrative, I would say, when I say that, there's so many options out there. Like, in terms of, I didn't know there were colorists, I didn't know that there were editors. I mean, that's something that I got to know as and when I kind of like got into the profession of say, a shoot. But I think we're so limited in terms of our in terms of our education system, or the awareness as per se. And I think that's something that we need to kind of like change in terms of what we will be giving to our future generation. And I think one of the few examples is that I see a few schools, at least, now in India or even internationally, how they're kind of exposing students to, say, different kind of like hobbies, which could be as simple as, say, gardening, or teaching them how to cook, or teaching them how to grow a plant. And I think, especially right now when we are in this COVID times, I think a lot of us are not really taught the way of living in school. We're all taught like academic stuff, which is like your science and math and stuff like that. But no one really teaches you, like, what really happens in your real life. And I think that's something that we really have to, introduce in our schooling, or at least say, bring in mentors, bring in people from the real life. When I say real life, say bring in people, say from like this particular thing that we're doing right now, I think is amazing because you get to see how other people are living. And I think that is when you start kind of like questioning in terms of, what is out there and how can we kind of like live a life that's much more fulfilling. And I think a little more about, I'd like to also kind of touch base in terms of, say, my profession, in terms of the myths and everything that's myths about the industry. I think one of the things what initially, I think even somebody did mention in terms of, when I told my parents about joining, say, makeup and doing makeup for the industry, I think the first thing was more like, oh, you're going to be working for the big bad world of Bollywood. And I think, again, it comes, say, from awareness in terms of people not really understanding what kind of like goes in. But I think what I realized was, say, from my corporate to that of being in this particular field, I went through a little bit about why I also left corporate was, other than the fact that, I was, why I didn't feel I was a fit there, is also I kind of, I realized that it was not a very safe place for women. And I think that was one of the main reasons I kind of disliked the whole environment. And when I kind of like moved from that to, say, the stereotypical notion that Bollywood is unsafe for women, I think that's something that I'd completely, deny, because I think being in the industry for about 11 or 12 years, it's one of the most safest platforms, especially for women, because you are not looked the same way how you are in terms of when you're in a corporate. I think in corporate what happens is there's like a lot of like hush hush and under the carpet kind of a thing that happens, which really no one talks about. So this is a little thing about the fashion industry, or say the Bollywood industry, that I'm kind of like covering. I think also in terms of what I was getting back to was in terms of the experiences, what this job has kind of like taught me is the way it's kind of gotten me in touch, or I've kind of interacted with some of the best people around the world. Like I get to travel a lot because my job is such that I do get to be on some of the most beautiful and exotic locations around the world. And it also kind of gives me an opportunity to kind of like interact with some of the most influential people around the world through the people that I'm kind of like working with. So I think that's something in terms of, which somebody else also mentioned earlier, that in terms of the kind of people that you kind of like come across, and how your perception of life and everything kind of changes because of the kind of people that you're around with. So I'm very grateful that I did that shift from, say, corporate to that of following my heart and going with my gut and wherever I am right now today. But having said that, I think for me still, a lot of people ask if this is my ultimate or if this is it. Honestly speaking, makeup profession is super, I'd say physically it's very, takes a lot from you, because we're kind of like standing for about 12 to 15 hours if you're in a shoot. And if you're kind of doing this every day, if you're one of those top makeup artists or a hairstylist, we're doing this every day, which takes a huge toll on your body. So I do love makeup, but I think it's still a transitioning thing for me. This job is kind of like also kind of, helped me kind of branch out to a lot of other things that will kind of like say open out in the future in terms of, in the future in terms of what other things I want to like pursue. And this is definitely, I'd say, a transitioning phase for me, and there's so much more in the pipeline. Oh, does it scare me? Not really, because I think somewhere down the road, I really like the excitement of, challenging myself with, say, different goals. And it kind of, I do look out for like a lot of things when it, I think I don't like if anything kind of goes onto a very mundane activity, I would say. And I think that's something that kind of pushes me to do something differently every time. One of the things that at the age of 35, or after 11 years of makeup, is what I've gotten into is healing. So that's something that I was really, really interested in. And this COVID Corona time has given me the time to kind of get into, say, alternative healing. So I'm a theta healer right now, and I think that's something, like I said, I think I'm still kind of like in the beginning of a lot of my journeys. So yeah, so this is it. I don't know if there's any questions, but yeah, that's it from me right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandhya. That was fantastic hearing about your journey from corporate to makeup and to the brilliant place where you've reached. And we wish you all the success in whatever you do from here on. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the final speaker, what I will do now is kind of go back for a moment to where all of this started from. At the beginning of the school lockdown for the coronavirus pandemic, we decided to make Notebook completely free of charge and opened up universal access. Given that we have a huge number of parents and students here with us today, teachers as well, we just wanted to give you a quick 2-minute demo of Notebook Portal and for you to see how easy it is to use. When you visit the website notebook.school, that's www.notebook.school, this is the screen that you see. You click on login. Once the login page opens up, enter study at home as your username and 1234 as your password. Right now, it's universally free, unlimited access, and the username and password are right there on the page. You click on login and you are logged in. What I will quickly show you is how you can navigate to your class. Under my subject, you have the board CBSE and you have the various classes listed out. Under every class, you will see the list of subjects that are available under that class. We currently cater to all classes from classes 1 to 12. We also cater to other boards like ICSC, UP board and West Bengal board. In UP and West Bengal board particularly, we use the vernacular language to deliver English as a subject. Given the topic that we have today, I find it very apt to go to CBSE Class 9 English to play a very quick video, a part of a very quick video for you. These are how our lessons are designed. You can see that under English, you have grammar, writing section, prose, poetry, and others. We will move to the poem, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost.
Hello students, in our poetry lesson for the day, we shall be reading one of the most enchanting poems written by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. The poem talks about the human condition and the dilemma we face while making certain choices in life. It is about how we live those choices and move on.
As you can see, this is a short 5 minutes, 16 seconds lesson video. Alongside the lesson video, there are notes to help students refer to when they are studying from home.
On the 26th of March, 1874.
And there are solved question answer sets.
San Francisco, California.
There are textbook questions and questions from the past years of CBSE that get into these question answer sets. We also have a short recap video. These are 2 to 3 minute crisp videos that help students quickly revise a topic before an exam.
The Independent is a literary journal based out of New York City.
Every video is enriched with hand-drawn illustrations, quality music, and edited into short and crisp modules that help hold the attention span of young students.
However, years of struggle enriched his.
We will pause the video here, and we hope that all of you would now go back to notebook.school and revisit this video to finish the poem by yourselves. We will now move back to our speakers, and it is now my privilege to introduce a speaker who, for us, is staying up and joining us at midnight from Melbourne. Our next speaker is Ms. Shinjita Roy. Shinjita graduated from the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, and she worked as an architect for a while she kept imagining a life at the intersection of architecture and performing arts. Shinjita, with some like-minded people, started Chaturangana in the year 2014. Chaturangana is a project that seeks to distill architecture into its core numbers and then derive performances in music and dance out of those numbers. To further build on this particular project, she went to the University of Plymouth, UK for a master's in performing arts, and she's currently completing her PhD in performing arts at Deakin University, Melbourne. Shinjita dreams of changing public spaces in India forever by making performances an integral part of them. Shinjita, over to you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Shinjita, we hear you loud and clear.
Yes. Hello, everyone. This is really interesting. I have been mesmerized by all the talks, and it's so nice to see everyone doing such interesting work and so many roads that haven't been taken but yet taken. So as Shubhayu mentioned, my journey started on the lines of becoming an architect. And I think that was one of the best decisions I had taken, to go to the School of Planning and Architecture in Delhi. And so there was, of course, like all my friends, literally all my school friends are engineers. So there was, of course, I sat for the engineering exams, but I knew that I did not want to do engineering. I knew that I wanted to do a professional course. So I took up architecture, which clicked. I really, really enjoyed architecture. And the college I went to actually instilled in me the values of thinking on your own, of designing, of focusing on concept, and of doing something that you do really well. So becoming a perfectionist in the job that you do. So after college, I have always danced since I was a child. I did Bharatanatyam when I was in school, like as when I was in my school days in Kolkata. When I moved to Delhi, I shifted to Kathak because I was really mesmerized by the grace and flow of Kathak. Got my attention. And so in my architecture school, in my 4th year, I did a dissertation. We all had to do a dissertation where you have to choose your own topic. And like I said, like when you are made to think and you're made to think on your own, you basically start going in that part of your brain that otherwise when you are following what everyone else asks you to do, you don't. So I did my dissertation on how architecture has generated dance movements. And every time I have been to any good piece of architecture, especially heritage monuments, I have felt like dancing. I don't know, it might be something that is just specific to me, but these larger than life spaces have always had this impact on me to make me want to be bigger than myself or not just walk. But every time we go on a trip and you see these forts and palaces and you go and you see so many in one day, but all you do is walk around. So it gives me this feeling that these monuments are sitting there wanting to talk to me, but I was merely just brushing past. I wasn't getting into a dialogue or an interaction with this space. So then I pursued this thought and I started dancing about architecture. I use dance as a tool to interact with architecture and to also inspire other people to interact with architecture. Because a lot of times architecture merely becomes a backdrop or a photos. Like we have all seen a lot of Bollywood songs that happened in these exotic locations, or a lot of these YouTube videos also that people do in alternate locations. But hardly ever would you see that there is an interaction between the space and the movement. So then when I started researching about it, I figured that there is something like this in the West called site-specific dance. So site-specific dance is dance in alternative spaces or dance which is specific to a site. And then I sort of dedicated my research and work and everything to this. And the site-specific dance, I realized, is something which is a very Western concept used with contemporary dance and with all kinds of spaces, natural spaces, urban spaces. But what we have in India very uniquely is a very unique flavor of spaces. Our spaces are very much designed by our culture or our society or the way we use these spaces. So, you know, there's a whole concept of jugaad, or how we modify spaces according to how we want to use it. So client is at top of all design processes in India. But, and then I saw that there is Indian art forms, which are also very unique to themselves, and they're very scientific. So a very easy way for me was to marry them. To say you take one scientific piece of architecture and you take one scientific piece of art, and you'll make them talk to each other. And how I did that was I started this project, Chaturangana, with my friend. And we would go to lesser known heritage monuments. Of course, we were in Delhi, so there were hundreds of heritage monuments for us to go to. They were usually neglected sites because there are so many. Of course, a Qutub Minar or a Baha'i temple is very celebrated, but there are 1,000 others which a lot of Delhiites also don't know about. So we would go to these spaces, we'll spend time. And usually I would want to dance, so I would dance. My friend is a singer. We would see what kind of rag works in this place. And we sort of make a composition that fits for this space, in the sense that if we take this composition and apply it somewhere else, it should not work. Or if we take a different space and try to apply this composition there, it should not work. That is what site specific is about. So in turn, we contribute to the space contributes to our performance. So obviously this is not something that was happening in India. And this is not something that people were even talking or are even talking about. So when I went on with the idea that this is what I want to do, I realized I have to go and get trained about site-specific performance abroad to then come and apply it back to Indian sites. But interestingly, when I went to UK to do my master's, I realized that not a lot of people are doing it there either. So people who are doing site-specific dance are coming from a dance background, or the combination of architecture dance that I have in my life, thankfully, is a bit unique. There's not a lot of other researchers or performers in that zone. So in a sense, if you say it's not a road not taken, it's a road that wasn't made. So if there's a road made and you can take it, this road I had to make for myself. So then what I did was I started putting 2 and 2 together in multiple levels. So if I have a certain architecture knowledge, I have my dance background, I put it together, I make a project. But then I also started applying to various field of things. So because I put architecture and dance together and I was working with heritage monuments, I could tap into resources of, say, tourism, conservation architecture, public space design, and in general arts, performance arts. So there are a wide range of things that you can apply to, or you can join discourses on if you are doing an interdisciplinary practice. And what I enjoy most about interdisciplinary practice is I get to work with very interesting people. So all my projects are collaborative, and I see what the site asks for, and I bring on board multiple people of varied interests, and then I get to learn a lot from the process. So if I would just do a quick screen share. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we're getting it.
Okay. So this is just an example of the kind of monuments that we have worked with. This is a monument in MP, Madhya Pradesh, Mitavli. The parliament is designed on this. When we were there, there was nobody. There was the guard who was guarding the place, and he was rather friendly. So we went in there, we did what we do, we made a video, we put it on YouTube. Later, a lot of people watched this video And the student from Gwalior College of Architecture went there, and a lot of these design students went there. They would play the song, they would play the video at site, and they got back to us saying that it really helped us get inspiration to create something new. So we started with Khirki Masjid in Delhi. We did a few projects all over India. Then we started tapping into workshops. So we would take some students to a heritage site, spend some time with them, and basically guide them for them to make art for that space. So now the thing is, initially we were making it for what we felt, and then we wanted to widen the avenue of it and try to see if we can influence other people to create as well. Because on our own, we can only do so many monuments at one time. We want the chain to spread, the chain to grow, and we want more people and this practice to basically sustain. So we did a few workshops with students, and they were really interesting because education systems have changed, and students these days, they are so, they come up with very creative ideas. They are so on the game with social media and digital platforms. They can create wonders sitting at site. So, and also like when you are a student and you are close to the resources of your institution, and then all of them put together all their minds for like say 2-3 nights, and they come up with wonderful work. So the power of collaboration, group work really featured in these projects for us. Recently, I did a project with a group called Hamdasti in Calcutta, where it wasn't about a heritage site, but as you know, Calcutta itself is a heritage city. And we were working at a crossing, Girish Park, which is a very busy crossing where almost no one follows the traffic rules. So the intention was to use performance and try and rectify traffic errors that are happening in terms of pedestrians and vehicular traffic. But what happened by the end of it, it was a prolonged project over 4 to 5 months. What happened by the end of it was we started interacting with street children there, the shop owners there, and we developed a relationship with them. So also with the traffic police, this project was commissioned by the traffic police. So what I'm trying to say is, how do I stop share? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have a good concept, and if you're passionate about what you're doing, you start paving that path for yourself. And then you'll find out that the avenues will, like there'll be these multiple smaller paths that will sort of pop up on their own. And sometimes I would aim for something very simple, like I have been given this job to go and create a workshop in this traffic crossing. I would do that. But what will come out of it is multifold, and it gives me ample happiness to do it. So in the initial years when I was working as an architect, and I would do, it's never 9 to 5 for architects. It's almost like 9 to 3 in the morning. But when I would do that, and I would really miss dancing. So I would go to my dance class. But in my dance class, I was then enacting stories of Krishna, Radha, and the woman who's waiting, pining for her lover. And that wasn't me, you know. I wasn't religious. I'm a secular person. I could not associate to, but I absolutely love dancing. So I had to sort of listen to my voice and understand what is it that I can do with the resources that I have. And I realized that spaces speak to me, public spaces at most speak to me. And so I started to use my training in Indian classical dance to do something that is very relevant to me. And believe it or not, however, sometimes we think that Indian classical arts are very outdated and boring. They actually train you to go far and wide and apply this sort of training to multiple things in life. And they're not traditional, they're classical, so they apply to your contemporary lives as well. So my understanding of sital or rag, or in general, the structure of a dance performance helps me now to create something on my own for a site. And when I was in school, there was a lot of students. So when all of you who are in school, there are studies. Of course, studies are a big part of our school life, but there's also the extracurricular, which is what I was doing most of the time in school. I was either singing or rehearsing or dancing or in the theater, and I learned a lot from it. And what I did do very purposefully was not give up on that, even if I had my board exams. And my dance teacher especially had a lot to contribute to that. And she kept saying, it's just Sunday, come for an hour and it'll freshen your brain. How much can you study? So I would still dance throughout my 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, which is also the formative years, and which is why I felt by the end of it, I developed a liking for it. And even after school years, what I have always done is I have kept learning. I don't stop learning. A little secret is I also only practice when I learn. I am very bad at practicing on my own. So I kept going to classes. So even if I had the 9 to 3 o'clock job, and even if I had a very busy schedule and not the best conditions to run to dance classes at the other end of the city, some sort of a discipline in me pushed me to do that. So I would keep going to dance classes. I'll keep learning. I think the more you learn, your brain gears are churning. And when it's churning, you create new things. And of course, like everyone else said, there's immense support from friends and family. The grass always looks greener on the other side. Because I'm in my 30s now. I just turned 31. And so, my friends are buying cars and houses, and I'm like, I can hardly manage savings. How do I do this? But in turn, when these friends come back to you, and they would be really proud of the work that you have done generously from your heart, and it has some meaning, then it all makes sense. And if you are looking out, if you are looking for opportunities, I am pretty sure there's ample opportunity for all kinds of jobs in India, because India has a huge population. So a lot of part of that population is producing and funding, and there's so many things you can apply to. And because let's say my work conversations are mostly to do with the government of India, you read a lot of dead walls and deadlines. And so you have to not give up. You have to keep applying. When you run out of people to apply and engage within the country, you move out of your country and you engage with people. You look for resources. The basic thing is that I don't think I could do without doing what I do. So I tried. I did go to architecture offices for about 5 years. I was doing things parallelly because I couldn't stop doing this. And then I started to think, why can I not stop doing this? It's very insane. I can't do both together. And then you take the plunge and you move to the other side and you stick to it, because everything takes time. When you're creating a road for yourself, when you're doing something else that you don't have an example set, you can't look up to people because no one's done this before. So you stick to it because it's your passion. It's what you love doing. And by the end of it, I get a lot of joy when I see students creating things at site because of the way we have mentored them. Or when any little work that I do would make a difference to the site, or how people behave or people interact with the space, because that's my aim. I want to rejuvenate spaces. I want to make public spaces safer and better and draw interest to architecture through my work in performance arts. So when that happens, and it happens in bits and pieces, and it's mostly always happens. I have never had a session where I had gone out and done a work at a site and it has not given me the returns. That has never happened so far. And India has so many beautiful spaces that I don't think I'll ever run out of space to work with. And of course, there's so many artists, and today collaboration is the thing. So I stay connected with a lot of other artists. We always talk about doing something new. And the thing is, I think I also get bored very easily. So if I had to do a regular corporate job, or if I even had to do the same thing every day, I don't think I have it in me. I don't think I could do it. So basically, because I could not do it, I would rather do something that I love doing. I think that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Shinjita. Thank you for sharing that lovely journey with us, those photographs. And I'm sure a lot of parents here whose children have taken an active interest in the arts be it dance, music, painting, whichever form of art, would take heart in knowing that there's a whole world of opportunities out there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the very end of our presentation today. We would have typically done a question and answer, but I'm aware a lot of you have been here for the whole session, and we thank you for your patience. There are some questions that would require answering, and we will get back to you all individually over email. We will pass on your questions to the relevant people that you've asked those questions to, and we will definitely get back to you with the answers. It has been an excellent session, going up into the Everest, down into the depths of deep sea diving, talking to a dancer from Melbourne or a makeup expert from Mumbai. I'm sure a lot of you have great takeaways to take back today. It is now my job to invite Achin back for the vote of thanks. Achin, if you could have you.
Sure. So what a great session we had. I really hope it inspires many more to follow their heart. Anshu, very thoughtful and practical, and shows you a quick, keen and observant mind. Burrett sir, great intellectual insights, and indeed, Motorcycle Diaries is one of my favorite too. Very inspiring father-daughter duo, Ajeet and Deeya Bajaj. Awesome presentation. Thank you for allowing all of us a glimpse into your world. Really inspiring. Sandhya, thank you for sharing your experience. Very well said, fulfilling your soul. And very nicely articulated, passion and profession together. I think very well spoken. Shinjita, very refreshing and rhythmic. And I'm sure it will inspire a lot of young students. And audience, I just can't thank you more. It has been, we are very thankful for the overwhelming support that we have received from you. These webinars have been very successful. In fact, going by the number of mails that we receive, people asking us with regard to our next session, topics that we are choosing, suggestions coming in, feedback, we are truly humbled. Thank you. It inspires us to work more towards this. Stay safe. Thank you and goodbye.